हेलो गुड इवनिंग टू एवरीवन। आपको मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है? वेरी गुड इवनिंग टू एवरीवन। क्या आप मेरी आवाज़ सुन पा रहे हैं? हाँ, अरे ठीक है। ठीक है। ओके, so I welcome you on again on Study Capital YouTube platform, and we are here to discuss our strategies, our syllabus for CUET MA English 2026 and a foundational batch along with it for GATE 2026 as well. To all those who have appeared in 2025 and were students as well, we have seen our result of JNU entrance examination as well as JNU as well as DU. And in the first cutoff itself, we have so many of our students getting admission into MA English program. So it's a matter of pride for all of us for the Study Capital platform. But it is also a time to understand that the way they're changing syllabus, they're changing pattern of questions. It is important for us to start our journey for the next year as soon as possible, and that is the aim behind starting our batch very early. The second thing is we also have a GATE entrance examination coming in February, and the important thing is a syllabus is quite similar to PG entrance program. The few changes obviously in the pattern of questions, and also because it's a exam that will help you out in getting admission to IIT Madras for your masters and further in for your research in IITs. So obviously it's going to be a little bit different from CUET PG MA English entrance program, but because we have time and because it's a very important exam, we have given this liability to ourselves to all those students who are going to appear in CUET MA English program. We have some of our students clearing GATE entrance examination the last 2 years, and then also getting admission into IIT Madras, where they are also getting 8,000, 10,000 rupees per month because they are taking admission through GATE English literature. So that is a very good opportunity for all of us to go through it, to get into IITs for your master's programs, which is obviously a goal for all of us who are reading. So before any delay, I'll start now with introducing you the syllabus of CUET MA English program, entrance program, as well as GATE. Remember, this is a different kind of syllabus that I am going to explain it to you. The basic syllabus that they have provided, the UGC have provided, it's very different from the kind of syllabus that I am going to discuss here, because if you have seen the syllabus of last 2 years, there are no major changes. They have added one or two things, more or less it's same, and it does not actually talks about the kind of units that you have to read. It's simply written like a genre or things like that. So I'll try to categorize it into certain sub units, and I'll try to explain it to you so that you understand that there are so many things that you have to cover for MA English entrance examination, and it's no more facts or important quotes that you used to read before 2-3 years back, and through which you can clear the exam. It's very different now, especially for English program, and that is something that we are going to discuss today. So without any delay, I hope आप सभी को मेरी आवाज़ आ रही होगी, आप सुन पा रहे होंगे. एक बार अगर आप चैट में इस चीज़ को बता देंगे तो और भी बेटर रहेगा, ताकि हम उस चीज़ को आगे कंटिन्यू कर सकें. ठीक है, चलिए. So I'll talk about very basic things first. It's just कि how many questions you'll have to attempt, how much time you'll get. It is something that is a common knowledge, so I'll not give much time to this particular thing. Obviously there are going to be 75 questions. From last 2 years the pattern have changed. So before if you'll go back to 2023, you'll find that there were around 75 or 100 question part A, part B divide, but there is no such thing now. They have already made sure that now you are going to get 75 question. All are from subject domain. That means you are going to get questions only from English literature. The time frame is now, very interestingly, they have reduced time frame last year, so you only get 90 minutes. So that means around 1 minute for a per question, and that too with comprehension in it. Last year there were 2 comprehension, before that there was 1 comprehension. So you understand that it's not that easy. Although you know English literature questions, you know it, then you'll take only 30 seconds, otherwise you'll take much more time than that. So it's not that much difficult, but getting 2 comprehensions in a paper, one prose, one poetry, it gets, you need to be very sure about the time frame as well. That is why the time frame of this paper is also very important. You get 4 marks for the right answer, and one there is a negative marking. So that's a basic information. I'll come to discuss certain syllabus of GATE examination as well, and I'll try to make make you understand the I'll try to make the comparison, and I'll try to show you how with your MA English program you can also clear GATE entrance examination as well. Now see, the duration of the exam is of 3 hours. In the GATE examination you'll get 100 marks, but the questions here are of 65. Now the challenging part is this paper is not that much difficult, but the pattern of it is something that you need to understand. So you have multiple choice questions like MA English program, but you also have multiple select question, MSQ. So more than one options can be right in the particular question, and then there are numerical answer type question as well, mathematical reasoning and teaching aptitude, like that, right? So that's the one change that you find. You'll get 55 questions from the domain, from your subject, but there are also 10 questions from general aptitude. That is one change that in GATE examination, along with multiple select questions. I'll talk about it later. Now you see here also there are certain questions which are 1 marks question. There are also questions for 2 marks as well. So very 65 questions. Within it you find MSQ, MCQ, some questions of 1 mark, some questions of 2 marks. So the pattern is quite different. Now for 1 mark question, you'll be the negative marking is 1/3. But for the 2 mark question, you'll have a 2/3 mark, your 2/3 marks will be deducted for a wrong answer. And if you are solving those MCQ questions, multiple select questions, then there is no negative marking. So within this examination, there are few questions, 1 mark question, 2 marks question, and then MSQ. And in MSQ, there is no negative marking, but in MCQ, in 1 mark question, in 2 mark question, there is negative marking. So that is also one difference between MA English exam and GATE entrance examination. This is just the kind of pattern that these 2 exams come up with. Now look at the division. When you'll see the syllabus of CUET PG MA English program, the way they have provided, GATE syllabus is quite similar to the UGC NET program, but the question paper is very different. You'll find these are the fundamental units that you read no matter which exam you are appearing. If you are a English literature student, these are the categorization in your graduation program as well. This is the categorization, very similar. You'll find obviously different kind of papers in masters, but for the NET examination as well, the kind of division is similar. The kind of syllabus that CUET PG has provided or the GATE project is quite different. But this division is very important for us because this will help you out with the books. This will also help you out with the kind of questions that they are going to ask. So the very first is obviously history of British English literature. When you think of history of British English literature, it is obviously, history of English literature is obviously history of British English literature. So from Anglo-Saxons to postmodern era. English literature, when you read, it is divided into further ages, right? So you have the first stage coming from Anglo-Saxon. So Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Norman, the Middle Ages period, then Chaucer period, right? Age of Darkness, age of Shakespeare, so on and so forth. And you find it is further divided into 3 parts, very different manners, right? So you have ages named after king or queen ruling during that particular time frame. You also Queen Victorian period or Queen Elizabethan period. You also have ages named after important writers. So you have, for example, age of Dryden, age of Samuel Johnson. And you also have ages divided on the basis of characteristics, the literary characteristics, like the neoclassical, for example, or the romantic aspect in romanticism. So there are further divisions. But you know that there is a rich history of British literature that you have to cover for your examination. Now, if you're obviously you are in your graduation last year, that is why you are watching this video, and you know that when you read history of British literature in your syllabuses in different universities, you read from Anglo-Saxon to postmodernism. But in order to understand Anglo-Saxon period, you have to go back to 55 BC. to the original inhabitants of England. That means from 55 BC to today, 2025. This is the rich history that you have to cover in history of British English literature. And it is not just the history. You have to understand the history, obviously the historical part, but the the social life of the time frame, the political scenario of the life frame, the literary characteristics of the life frame, that particular time frame. What are the major writers? What are the minor writers? The characteristics of literature, how the social environment affected, the writers who are writing during that particular time frame. There are around 3-4 questions every year based on the historical data that you collect from every age, be it age of Shakespeare, be it age of Chaucer, be it modern age, postmodernism, the difference between the two. Last year we have covered this in detail, and there were so many questions coming from the characteristics and the differences between two ages, how one age precedes the next and the difference between two. So within every age, the scenario that you have to cover along with the literary part, that is obviously part of your syllabus. So it looks like a basic unit, but there is so much, and even today the 50% of the questions that comes in your exam are from history of British English literature. Obviously there are so many units, they are merged together. It's not a compartmentalized difference. So you'll find that there are so many literary terms that comes from history of British English literature. There are certain theorists, literary critics who are part of British literature. So there is so much in between that you'll also have to consider. Now I'll talk about it in detail, but that is the first unit altogether. Then you have Indian writing in English. From last 2 years, not just in GATE examination and NET examination, but if you'll see CUT PG as well, you will find they are asking so many questions from Indian writing in English, and I have deliberately written Indian writing in English. There's one another unit, Indian English literature, right? And then Indian literatures. If you have seen CUT PG syllabus that is provided by NTA, you'll find there is Indian literature and there is Indian writing in English. So when I say Indian literature, like I.S. Radhakrishnan in his very famous lecture when he was giving data of the committee that was formed in 1949, he says Indian literature is one but written in many languages. And those languages you have to cover, because the translation and comparative part is also a part of your syllabus. That means literature not only in English but also in in Hindi, or in major writers from different languages. Not only Hindi, but there is Bengali, there is some Assamese writers, right? Kashmiri writers, and there are so many other major writers in which you are also getting languages in which you are getting Sahitya Academy and Gyanpith. Those writers also becomes very important for you. And obviously the Indian classical literature, you can't ignore that part, because Indian aesthetics is one such area which was explored in great detail in the last 2 examination of PG entrance as well as in the GATE examination. So Indian literature is a vast unit, but within which we also have Indian writing in English. That means when English was introduced to India in 1600 and the use of English till today, right? So there are major historical changes that have taken place. You might have heard of the Charter Act, the 1817 Hindu college formation, then a letter of Raja Ram Mohan Roy to Lord Amherst. Then the 1827 we have the first poetry by Harp of India by D'Erezio. Then the first play coming in 1831, The Persecuted. The novel, emergence of novel in 1850s. The development of all those genres in India. So how English was introduced, the role of the for example Macaulay's Minute or the 1854 Magna Carta of English language, these colleges that were formed in between, the translation that have taken place not only by Indians but by people like William Collins, who have translated Abhigyan Sakuntalam into English for the very first time, introducing Indian knowledge system to those who are British, right? So it's very important, the historical development as well as the literature in between. So how for example, Indian English poetry emerged in this atmosphere. How Indian English poetry writers, they started writing. So the way of writing also is very important. There was one question from the kind of adaptation of English, right? So how English was introduced in the beginning, then how writers adopted it in the literary canon, the changes within English language by the Indian writers itself. So you find a great deal of difference in English language, particularly when you read Teoru Datta as well as Raja Rao, for example, in Kantapura and many other text, and also A.K. Ramanujan. So there's a great deal of difference, right? Difference in writing style. Not only the content. Content will vary according to the historical time frame, according to the writer. It's very subjective. But at the same time, the impact of society and how it changes the pattern of writing in English. That is a very, very important unit, and they're asking so many questions from that particular unit, which is usually people don't read it much, but that is very interesting. And when you'll read it along with the literature, you'll read how poetry emerged in India, how English poetry emerged in India in relation to the time frame, then it will become very interesting, and that is why they're asking so many questions from Indian writing in English. There is one more change, I'll talk about it in question pattern, how they're asking questions related to this unit, okay? And then obviously Indian aesthetics, which is very, very important. Then this is a very vague term, literary term and technique. Anything can be a literary term, right? You find a pattern and that can be considered as a pattern, as a literary term. For example, if I say, the traditional woman in English literature, if you see Victorian period, you find so many fallen woman characters, right? So you have fallen woman as a term as well. So many women, characters in the Victorian period, they are victim, but they are also the one who will suffer throughout their life. Tess comes into my mind, Ruth comes into my mind, and there are many other examples. Anna Russia, in the writings of Munshi Premchand as well, you find such characters. So that becomes a term because there is a pattern, right? And then the emergence of new woman, for example, in Doll's House by Norwegian writer, right, Esbin. So you find now new woman is again a pattern that you'll find in the writings of Henry James and many other writers. So that also becomes a term. Any poetry, a form is a term. So it's a very vague term. You have to read so many terms in terms of figure of speech, in terms of groups, schools. There are also terms and also movements. So you'll have to read this unit in relationship with this unit as well as many other units that will be a part of your syllabus, right? Then you have genres. Now I have deliberately mentioned it alongside history of British English literature, because when you read history, right, so that will become very boring, because you are not a history honors, you're not a history honors student, you're a literature student. So the literary history aspect is important for you, but the historical aspect is equally important because it affects the writing, right? So writer is not writing in vacuum, right? Chaucer is not writing in vacuum. He's writing in his society. So the impact of society is quite visible in the writings of Chaucer. And Canterbury Tales is a very good example for that, right? So the historical aspect, but as well as the kind of writing that has been done during this period. So you read, for example, Queen Elizabethan period. So when you think of poetry as a genre, you have Shakespeare, obviously, you have Spenser, you have Philip Sidney and many other minor poets as well, Wyatt and Surrey and others. When you think of drama, there is university wits and along with Shakespeare and many other, again, minor writers. When you think of prose writing, there is Bacon, right? So you have to look at every age from genre wise as well, because you can't just read it separately. So that will become very difficult for you to remember things. But if you connect it with the age, then it will become easy for you. You know the historical background, you know the literary characteristics, and then you can see the development of every genre in particular era, right? So what was the status of drama, for example, in the Victorian period? So you know the Licensing Act will come, the drama will decline, but there are people who are writing drama. Oscar Wilde is one such example, right? And then the new form of drama that will emerge with the modern period. So how you associate these genres, the development of these genres in every particular era. Now, when I say genre, I talked about poetry, drama and novel, but and obviously prose writing. But remember, there are many other genres which we usually forget. That is, for example, Autobiography is one such genre that you can think of. So the last year question, the first autobiography of Indian writer. It's a very difficult question, but at the same time very easy, because you know the first novel, right? You know the first poetry writer. You know the first novel writer of India. So why not the first autobiography writer from India? It is a question, and that is very obvious, because you need to change the way you read the hegemony of the different genres. Autobiography is as much important as other genres. Short story is as much important as novel. And short story and these genres, the lesser known genres, are important genres for gate examination as well. If you look at the syllabus of the questions from the gate entrance examination, you'll find there are so many questions every year, 2 or 3 questions from short story, American short story writers such as Edgar Allan Poe and others, right? So these genres are equally important, and you need to understand the development, the writers of these particular genres in every age. So it's better if you read them in chronological order, right? Then there is comparative and translation studies. Now we have changed the way we were reading comparative literature and translation studies last year, and it worked out in our favor as well, although there were very few, 2 questions hardly from this particular unit in the last examination. So in the 2024 examination there were around 15 questions, and the way we were preparing this unit, because it is very theoretical in approach and also practical. So you can read translation studies as a theoretical approach, using a theoretical approach, and also as a practical approach, because translation is a practice, right? So not only translation methods, but also translation practices in different eras. What was Dryden, for example, doing when he was doing translation? He was very famous. So the status of translation in the 17th century, and how it changed when Pope was translating in 18th century. Pope is also a very famous translator of Oedipus, the Homer's writing, right? So you see, in every age, and I have given especially the British literature example, you can also use it in Indian context as well. And the important term is studies. That means the emergence in the postmodern period, the translation turn that took place. Susan Bassnett is one of the theorists who talks about the cultural turn in translation studies as well as the translation turn in cultural studies. So what happened in 1970s? Translation was taking place before as well, but the change that will come with the development of studies. So there were reciprocal characters in 15th century as well. The disability studies came later in 1990s. There were female characters in 15th century, 14th century as well, but the feminism came later, right? In very similar terms, translation was taking place in the past as well, but the translation studies emerged in 1970s. So there are certain theorists, very similar to when you think of structuralism, you have Saussure, you have Lévi-Strauss, right? Very similar, when you think about translation studies, there are certain theorists. When you think of comparative literature as a theory, there are so many theorists that we'll have to discuss alongside the practice of doing this particular thing. There was a very famous essay, what is comparative literature? And there's a comparison between Abhigyan Sakuntalam and Oedipus Rex. There was one question from that particular writer in the 2024 examination as well. So not only as a theory, but also as a practice. You'll have to read about it. It will take time now. From the last 2 years, they have changed the pattern. So it's not just a theory that you'll read in one day and it will help you out. But there is so much that you'll have to read in this unit as well. And it is specific to master's exam and not to gate entrance exam, gate exam. But there is one such thing which is common between them. The common part is the part of the studies. So the cultural turn that took place in translation studies in 1970s, which through which a translator, not only the status of translator changed. It is not he's not passive or she is not passive, rather they became active consumer of translation. So how it happened, and the theoretical part is also important for the gate examination as well. So there is one change that you find, but more or less there is also similarity within this unit as well. Now the criticism part, criticism and theory. Last year there was no question from theory, right? And you see the change that has happened. There were very around 15 to 17 questions from comparative literature unit in 2024. There were no question from here. in the last examination. There were few questions, very few questions, one or two from literary theory. That means theory becomes very important for this year examination, that for this exam, right? For the 2026 exam. And obviously for GATE entrance examination, there is major unit, right? For GATE entrance examination as well. And this year, I personally believe this is going to be very important unit for CUET PG as well. And also it is something that most of the students from graduation are haunted of, because they don't read literary theory. In major universities, it's not a part of the graduation syllabus, so it becomes very difficult. But how we reach to literary theory? To understand that, we have literary criticism. So, and to read in literary criticism, you'll have to read from Plato to what to say, T.S. Eliot. So there is Greco-criticism, Plato, Aristotle. Then you have Greco-Roman criticism. You might have heard this name. Even if you have not, we'll cover these things in our classes, right? So we have Plato and Aristotle. Then we have Horace Longinus in the Roman period. Then we have Virgil around medieval ages. Then you have what you say, the Renaissance criticism, Gascoigne, Philip Sidney, and some of the commentaries on Aristotle. Now the commentaries on Aristotle is probably not important for PG examination, but for GATE it is very important. I'll talk about the changes in later. Philip Sidney, very important critic, not only as a writer, but the criticism of Philip Sidney. Then you enter into the next period, you have Ben Jonson as a critic. Then you have Dryden, very important critic of the neoclassical period. Then you have Alexander Pope as a critic. These are very important writers as well. So you read Pope as a writer, you read Dryden as a writer in your syllabus, but they are also very important critics, right? So their contributions, such as essay of dramatic poesy, or there is one unit, there is one term that you find in your syllabus, that is ode, right? That very easy. Again, ode is kind of poetry, but there is a definition of ode in one of the works by Dryden. Now, in the preface of that particular work, he talks about the kind of satire that he is going to use in his writing, and he also talks about Horatian odes and the definition that he has given to it. So if they directly ask you in examination, obviously a GATE question, that is why I am mentioning it here, the definition of satire by Dryden, and then what is the definition, and then in which work this definition comes. It is not a, Dryden as a writer type of question. It is Dryden as a critic, right? Dryden also talks about so many other things, but that is one dimension that I am basically mentioning here, right? So all these critics, Dryden, be it Ben Jonson or Pope, these are very important as a writer and equally important as a critic. Then you enter into the last part of the neoclassical period. You have Samuel Johnson, very important critic, right? Lives of most eminent poets, as well as preface to Shakespeare, two important works in literary criticism. Then you have the romantic criticism, like preface to Lyrical Ballad, like Biographia Literaria, again Defense of Poesy by Shelley. Keats, some of the letters of Keats, where you find negative capability, where you find egotistical sublime. You have Thomas Love Peacock, 4 Ages of Poetry, and many other critics of the Romantic period. Then Victorian period, you have Matthew Arnold, very important critic. John Ruskin is a very important critic. At the end of it, you also find Walter Peter and others. In modern age, you have T.S. Eliot. Now, T.S. Eliot can be considered as a bridge between criticism and theory. He called new criticism as a lemon squeezing method, right? Like the way you squeeze lemon and take rust out of it, that is how you have to squeeze text and take meaning out of it. Very interesting essay where he talks about these things. But in criticism part, you read Tradition and Individual Talent, you read Hamlet and His Problem, you read the Metaphysical Poets, some of the essays written by T.S. Eliot along with I.A. Richards and F.R. Lewis. That is a part of your criticism. But as I mentioned, he's a bridge between criticism and theory. So now from here, it starts literary theory. So you have formalism and new criticism coming, and then structuralism, post-structuralism, reader response theory, new historicism, Yale critiques, and many other theories that are part of. Now if you'll see the PG syllabus of CUT-PG syllabus, you'll find they have mentioned feminism, they have mentioned Marxism, they have mentioned structuralism and post-structuralism. So why to read formalism then? Why to read reader response theory then? Why to read new historicism, because it's not part of your syllabus? Or the psychoanalysis, for example. But they are all related, right? In order to understand new criticism, you must understand feminism. They are linked. They are influence of, they have influenced each other. So in order to understand post-structuralism, you need to understand structuralism, which is a part of your syllabus. But in order to understand the changes that have taken place because of post-structuralism, the meaning, a difference, you'll have to read reader response theory as well. You have to read people like Foucault, for example, which is very famous nowadays for any other examination that you can see related to English literature, right? So even if three or four parts of criticism theory are mentioned in your syllabus, all these theories are important. For PG level, probably not much in detail. So you need to understand which theorist is a part of which particular, theoretical space, and then the works that they have written or the term that they have coined, or the basic understanding of those terms. So what is panopticanism, for example? What is close reading? What is ambiguity? What is a heresy of paraphrase? What is apora? What is a discourse, or terms like that. I hope you understand these things, which is a part of literary theory. Now there are basic differences between them two, which I'll obviously talk about in different classes. It's just an introduction of the syllabus. So these are the things that you read in literary theory. Then this is a very important unit. This is directly mentioned in your syllabus, and this is a unit which gives you 4 or 5 questions in any exam. So you have 4 or 5 very important awards. Sahitya Academy is there, Gyanpeeth, which is a largest greatest award in Indian literature. Then you have Sahitya Academy ho gaya, Gyanpeeth ho gaya. Then you have Nobel and Booker. These are 4 major awards, right? So you'll have to know the first one, the last one, the first woman, the last woman, the important writers, the famous one, their year, for which work they are awarded, their obviously their contribution in literature, so much, and the factual information related to it. The first one, the last one, for which language they are awarded, right? The first woman particularly. Very different kind of factual information from all those awards, and you always get 2 or 3 questions from this particular unit in every exam that will appear, be it NET, be it GATE, be it CUET, or any other exam related to English literature. You'll surely find 4 or 5 questions coming from this particular unit as well. Now I have not mentioned deliberately Marxism and feminism here. I'll talk about it in the next slide. So this is basically the division of syllabus. But look at the kind of topics that are the major focus of not only PG examination but GATE examination as well. So these are the topics that you can see that you'll find in 2024 paper, 2025 paper as well. I mentioned waves of feminism. Now you need to understand, you can look at the feminism from 2 perspectives. One as a movement, one as an ideology. And there is feminist literary criticism. That is again a very different thing. Around so many people out there, they don't know the difference between feminist literary criticism and feminism. Right? So if I'll ask you from which time frame feminist literary criticism emerged. Now, if you are aware about the first wave, second wave, third wave, you will think it started from 1830s with the Seneca Fall Convention happening in 1830s, right? The first emergence of first wave, what we say, suffrage movement. But it is a social and political movement that happened. It is feminism. It is not feminist literary criticism. It's a very basic thing. But there was one question from it in the recent NET examination. जैसे लोग बहुत परेशान हुए apparently, and basic understanding, but you need to understand the difference between the two. Then you need to understand who are feminist literary critics and who are feminist critics, right? Then the people who are a part of first wave of the feminism, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, their contribution, why the difference between them, right? If there was first wave, why there was a need for the second wave, why there was a need for the third wave, wave or even for fourth wave that we have today, right? The development further, the differences between feminism, why we have womanism, for example. If we already had feminism, why we needed womanism, why we needed Dalit feminism, why we needed different forms of feminism and womanism coming into existence. So the difference between them, the theoretical model of the second wave of feminism, Simone de Beauvoir was there, right? Ellen Showalter was there, Susan a very important text, The Mad Woman in the Attic was there, The Dialectic of Sex was there. So much contributed by these people. The sex and gender dichotomy, the differences between the two, who will come and say gender is a social construct, and then future you'll find Butler coming and saying even sex is a social construct. So it's a very foundational unit, and there is so much literature available to support the theory, and if you connect them and if you understand this particular unit, it is going to help you in literature as well as in the theory. So it's a very important, crucial, at the same time easy to understand, and if you get that, then you'll surely get 3-4 questions in different aspect. That is why I have mentioned it in different contexts. So it's not just feminism, but feminist literary criticism and how it is related to your other units that are available in your syllabus. So that is how you relate with it, right? There is Marxism as well, very similar. So 1850s, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, that is not Marxism. That is the beginning of the Marxism. The New Left is there. The BCCC, Birmingham Center of Contemporary Cultural Studies. Even if you're not aware of, I get that, but it's a very, very important movement that will. There is Raymond Williams. There is Stuart Hall and many others, which are if you are not aware about that, that tells you that you need to read about these things if you are concerned about your GATE examination, right? Probably not for PG in detail, but yes, for GATE examination you must know the New Left group, the BCCC, the contribution of that, the Yale critics, the Frankfurt School and their contribution. So it's not just Marx and Engel, there's so much more. Althusser, his contribution, right? So that is one part. Then, as I mentioned, hegemony, identity, repressive state operators, ISA, contrapuntal reading, and many other terms. So it's not just for Marxism, but for any other literary theory that is a part of your syllabus. These are very important questions. You'll definitely find the definitions and who coined them. So there is a definition of hegemony by Gramsci, by Althusser, by Marx himself. So the difference between them and the development as well, how Gramsci talks about it, how he associated hegemony with identity, how Althusser will come and he'll talk about different thing and he'll relate that particular thing with hegemony. So the differences between them, right? And how Marx, obviously, how he starts talking about it, the influence of Hegel on Karl Marx. So that is very important unit. And nowadays they're asking questions from there in your CUT PG examination as well. So it is no more foreign for you as well. It must not be foreign to you. You must know the differences in this particular unit as well. Okay, just a second. I hope you are getting my voice. Just confirm one more time so that we can continue. Now, I've mentioned here post-colonial authors, their works and concepts. There is a word literature section which I have mentioned it separately. Understand this thing. The post-colonial aspect comes in different nations differently, right? So, for example, Africa got its independence later. India got its independence in 1947. So, different nations have different, time frame associated with. America got its independence in 1776. So, the colonies that were part of, Britain, and their literature, the counterpart of it, right? That the contrapuntal reading that people like Edward Said will talk about. So their contribution, what they are writing. Adichie is one such writer. Chinua Achebe is one such writer. But not only Nigerian and African. You'll have to read, if not for obviously for CUT-PZ, you just need to know the major writers, because there are movements which are not only specific to Britain and India, but to different countries as well. In order to understand Romanticism, you need to understand the German, Strung and Drang movement. In order to understand, Romanticism, you also need to understand French Revolution and its impact on literature, right? So with every age, Kafka, the Kafka way of writing. So he's not British, he's not Indian, right? You know, Afrofuturistic writer Octavia Butler. There was one question in 2023 examination. So he's not, she is not what you say, British writer or Indian writer. So it's not part of your syllabus, but it is a part of your syllabus indirectly. So all these writers for PG level, you just need to know certain writers. For example, there was one question 2024 Hack Seat, which is a retelling of Tempest by Margaret Atwood, and Margaret Atwood is a Canadian writer, but the question was asked even though she's not British or what you say Indian writer. That means the word literature aspect, the writings and their important terms, and the award is a part of your syllabus. Margaret Atwood is one such writer who's awarded twice Booker Prize. So the author becomes very important for you, right? So all those Canadian, famous Canadian, Australian writers. The Australian retelling of Tempest, if I ask you, this is the question of GATE entrance examination. GATE examination, you need to know that, right? So the major writers of other countries as well. Now, you know one or two writers from every country, but the kind of questions that you'll get. For example, if I ask you, only Australian writer awarded with Nobel Prize. Now, it looks like a very easy question, but you'll not find any character, any list for that. You need to read it very, to say, in a different way. You need to think about these things. So the only writer who was awarded with Nobel Prize in Australia, the first sub-Saharan writer to be awarded with Nobel Prize, right? These kind of questions. So for that aspect, you need to read about these writers as well. Not only Nigerian and African, which are very famous, Thiango, Achibe, Adichie, and others, but also Australian writers. Patrick White is there, right? Canadian writers, and not Canadian only. Canadian literature doesn't only suffice with what you say Margaret Atwood or Henry Munro. There are many other important writers from Canada, from Australia, from New Zealand, and many other countries. Major writers for PG, but other aspects for GATE examination. Right? Then I mentioned legislative criticism. Now most of the criticism that you read is about rules and regulation. That is what legislative criticism is. So if you'll see the syllabus, there's one question that is very famous in GATE examination. Who prefers Shakespearean comedies over his tragedies? Now it looks like a general question, but it's a question from legislative criticism. So if you'll read, and that is not available in the summaries of preface to Shakespeare, but if you'll read Samuel Johnson, the text itself, then you'll find he talks about how Shakespeare was excellent when it comes to comedy, but he did a lot of hard work when it comes to tragedy. So he prefers comedy over tragedy because it came very natural to him, according to Samuel Johnson. Now this is a repeated question in different forms, not directly, but in different forms. So you need to understand why he said that, right? It's not just the positive sides that he talks about in Shakespeare, but also the negative sides. So what are those negative sides, right? If you'll understand that, then only you'll be able to solve this question. There is Philip Sidney as well. If I'll ask you one question directly that was asked in the GATE examination, rhyme is not necessary but desired. Who said that? Now, you need to understand that it's also a question from legislative criticism. Because if you'll read Philip Sidney, there is two writers where you find this discussion coming over. One is Dryden, the Crites versus Neander debate, where you find, Crites saying we should not use rhyme, but Neander, who is a representative of Dryden himself, says we should use rhyme. So you'll be, somehow attracted to that kind of answer because it is deliberately given there. It's a very important debate that you read in your syllabus. But there is also a hidden aspect to it. You need to understand that there is an argument about rhyme in so many theorists, so many literary critics from the Renaissance. So the debate started from Renaissance itself, right? And there is no, when I say Renaissance criticism, it is not only Philip Sidney. There are many others, but no one is teaching other writers. But in order to understand Sidney, you need to understand other theorists of the same time frame as well. There is, for example, Paley has also written a very interesting text related to defense of rhyme. There is Campion, there is Gascoigne, and then comes Philip Sidney. And if you know Philip Sidney is responding to someone, so that particular text, the School of Abuse, as well as the same writer has also written the defense of tragedy. So all these arguments are also important for GATE examination. For PG examination, you need to read Philip Sidney's text in detail, because this is also a question from PG examination, right? So you'll not need that kind of a background for PG examination, but that background is important for GATE examination. That's the difference between these two, exams. One thing that I mentioned here, ecofeminism and eco-criticism. Eco-criticism is a part of your syllabus, for PG examination. And then I mentioned one other unit of it, that is ecofeminism. So first wave, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, right? Then you have as an ideology radical, liberal, and other forms of feminist ideology. There comes the ecofeminist, that men is responsible for the exploitation not only of women but also of nature. So who coined the term, for example? Very basic question, right? Who coined the term ecofeminism? And who is the father of eco-criticism in Britain? Who is the father of eco-criticism in America? Now it again looks very similar, very easy, but it's a very important question. The first text of eco-criticism, for example, Nathan Carson's text, the contribution of that particular text, and as a theory also, right? These are two important units, part of syllabus in PG, and obviously very, very important in GATE examination. Then archetypal, they are very important unit, not directly related to your syllabus because it's not mentioned, but they have asked question from Fry so many times, Carl Jung so many times in your examination, right? Like archetypal, similarly like psychoanalysis, it is not part of your syllabus, but if you'll see 2024 question, there were 3 questions directly from Sigmund Freud only, right? Forget about Lacan, forget about Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, only one psychologist who is a very famous, known as father of psychoanalysis, right? And there were 3 questions directly from that particular theorist, even if it is not a part of your syllabus. So you need to understand how you can associate, you can understand modern period with Sigmund Freud, right? So in order to understand modern age, you need to understand psychoanalysis, you need to understand Marxism, how you enter into modern period, right? So you read about fragmentation, non-linearity and so many things of modern age. But how you reach to that kind of fragmentation, that will psychoanalysis and first wave of psychoanalysis, structuralism, and many other theories will help you to understand that kind of fragmentation. So that is why there are questions from psychoanalysis in your examination. So it's not directly given to you, but modernism is a part of your syllabus. In order to understand modernism, you need to understand Sigmund Freud as well. But it is obviously psychoanalysis is directly available in GATE examination pattern. So you need to read about it in great detail, right? Then this is metaphysical poetry, one such poetical group. Like Cavalier poets, you have metaphysical poets. So many questions from the characteristics, from the writers and their reformation as well. So when Samuel Johnson coined the term metaphysical poets, it was not the positive term. He used this term to criticize these writers, right? He says there are some writers who are merging, mixing heterogeneous ideas yoked together by violence. So when you merge things with violence, that is not a good mixture, right? But T.S. Eliot will come in modern period. He'll write an essay called The Metaphysical Poets in 1921. He'll talk about the unification of sensibility. Merging together these things is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, and they're not merging with violence. They're merging with humanity, with harmony. T.S. Eliot talks about. So for the very first time, they'll get status in modern period. So you understand, writers of 1630s getting that kind of status in 1920s. So there's so much in between. And in order to understand the change that is taking place, you'll have to read about metaphysical poets in detail. It is not only Donne, it is not only Marlowe, right? There are many other theorists, many other poets of this group, which is important for you. Yes. Then you have literary theory. One very famous question in PG and in GATE examination. Obviously, PG there were no questions related to theory last year. That tells you that there are going to be so many questions from literary theory this year. So they can't, they'll not obviously go into great detail. But one pattern that is common in GATE and in NET examination is you need to know which theorist is a part of which group. Then those people who are a bridge, like Roland Barthes is also a structuralist and post-structuralist. So how is structuralist, how is post-structuralist? Text written by him in structuralism, text written by him in post-structuralism. So the development, every group, the members of those group, the terms that they have coined, the books that they have written in chronology. This is very, very important. Like Death of an Author came in 1957. Structure, Sign and Play, the lecture came in 1966, right? Death of a Discipline came in 75. So all these writers, their important texts, when they were published in chronology, the terms where their term were coined, the definitions of those term is very famous. I remember one such question, very famous, very close to my heart, is the concept of male gauge. When I appeared in DU entrance examination in 2020, there were 3 questions from male gauge itself. Question number 98, 99 and 100. You can check that. They just gave the definition of the concept. You have to find out that it is male gauge. Then the 99th question was related to who coined the term male gauge. The last question was in which book the term was coined. So you understand that this is a way of asking questions. So you need to understand these things for every term, not just male gauge, one term, but every term that comes into arena of literary theory, right? Then the time period, one question, easy. So you need to understand everything in detail. If you'll read Routledge, it says Victorian period starts from 1832. But if you'll show this answer in your examination, it is a wrong answer because it actually starts from 1837. So not everything is reliable as well. Routledge, which is one of the best texts for understanding history of British English literature, tells you that Victorian period starts from 1832, which is not right. It starts from 1837. So what happened in 1832? The impact of that, particular rule in the Victorian period. Why Routledge tells you that it starts from 1832? That is important for you, but also need to understand what. But you need to understand how this is going to what are the strategies that you're going to make for your examination. So for exam, what is going to be the answer, and for your understanding, what is going to be the answer, that is also different. That will be dealing with it, right? Then the famous line, poetry makes nothing happen. For example, this line they have asked in gate examination, last gate examination, right? Now if you have to tell me which poem contained that particular line, or Death's to be not poet, that is very famous. Hold your tongue and let me love, a poem by Donne, the canonization. These are the questions, right? So the major poems from British literature, from Indian literature, and their famous lines. Now how you are going to remember that? Obviously you'll have to read them in great detail. My body didn't beat, he didn't beat me, but my whole body felt pain, says Kamla Das, right? Or Nizam-e-Sikil, his famous poems, Miss Puspa, Background Casually, the major writers, their poems, very, very important. They're directly mentioning the lines of these poems, and you'll have to read it. That means the basic reading, the root learning will not help you. You'll have to read so many summaries, so many poems in great detail, and that is why this time that you have is very, very important. We are going to deal with these things in our batch as well. Right, I'll talk about it in detail. I just wanted to explain you the topics that they are focusing upon. Then there is prosody. Now you see, linguistics has a different paper, right? Semantics and the different forms of language. They're obviously a different paper, but they're asking questions from prosody part, the study of versification. So the meters, stanza form, rhyme royal, Ottawa rima, heroic couplet, heroic quatraint, Spenserian stanza, Spenserian sonnet, Shakespearean sonnet, and all these rhyme schemes of these meter and forms, and then the literary examples. For example, they have asked about Adonais. So Adonais was written in which stanza form, right? So it's a very important text, but you need to understand the kind of meter, the kind of stanza that is used there, right? That is also a very famous question. Then translation and comparative history related question, not just as a concept, but also as a practice. I have already mentioned that. Indian aesthetics I have already mentioned is a very, very important topic from last 2 years in every examination that you have. Now this is contemporary Indian writers. अगर आप किसी रिसेंट नेट एग्जामिनेशन वाले बच्चे से मिलेंगे जिसने साल दिया है, सबसे ज़्यादा अगर किसी यूनिट ने उनको परेशान किया है, वो है कंटेम्प्रेरी इंडियन राइटर्स. So maybe, and if you'll see the last year CUT PG examination as well, there were 2-3 questions from, I think 4 or 5 questions from those writers whom even I am not aware of. I will be very honest, right? So writers who are writing in 2018, writers who have published their text in 2016 or 2020, and not those who are awarded with awards like Sahitya Academy or Gyanpith, but the popular literature writers, right? Writers whom you'll not read in any anthology, or they're not prescribed in any university, but you'll have to read about them as well. You have to do a research, the contemporary writers, their contribution, the retellings that they're coming up with, right? Rereading Ramayana, Chandrabati and Maula Sudeepa Dev Sen's text, comes to my mind. So the mythical notion, their texts, the translations that are emerging, or what is the content of these contemporary writers and the famous writers from Indian subcontinent is again very important for GATE examination. And there were 2-3 questions from in the PG examination as well last year. So they may continue with this pattern. So you'll have to take care of this particular unit as well. Diaspora is not mentioned here, but Indian diaspora is a separate unit in PG examination. And obviously, there is a very famous quote by Salman Rushdie as well. The best form of Indian literature after partition is actually written by those who are writing in English. So think about Indian literature. And the best part of it is written in English language. But the irony is you can't meet these writers because they are living somewhere in Britain, in America. So the major writers, think about Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Arundhati Roy. Arundhati Roy is living in India, but Salman Rushdie is famous writer. V.S. Naipaul is there. Anita Desai is there, right? What to say? Kiran Desai is there. Arvind Adiga is there. Major writers, and they're all diasporic writers. So diaspora is again very, very important unit for your examination as well, right? Then you see the type of questions that they have asked. I'll not talk about it in great detail now because it's just an introductory class. So you see the movements and clubs from every age, right? Not just today, but for every age. So provisional और final answer की में कुछ फर्क आया है. किस एग्जाम में, किस एग्जाम की आप बात कर रहे हैं? नेवर सेटल. यूजी की बात कर रहे हैं, पीजी की बात कर रहे हैं. दिस इज द पीजी क्लास फॉर एमए इंग्लिश. इट्स नॉट a UG class. Okay, this is a class for CUT PG MA English. It's not a class for UG. Okay, then you see movements, clubs from different ages. So there is a club, for example, the Pre-Raphaelite school, the Oxford school, right? The what do you say? The movements of Imagism is there, Surrealism is there, Dadaism is there. Angry young man movement is there, kitchen sink drama movement is there, and there's so much, especially more than 15 groups in especially in modern period, but throughout history as well. Sir, I guess you must know about it. So no, I have no idea about UG exam. Probably Vipul sir will tell you about this. Okay, this is a class for PG. Sorry. Yeah, so those kinds of movements are important for you. Then works and their dates from canonical writers. I've talked about it in great detail now. The concept works, dates from cultural theorists, literary theorists as well. Genres, the evolution that I talked about, not just poetry, drama, and prose, but also many other genres and their development throughout in every age. The literary awards, important questions I mentioned, factual. The adaptations, nowadays they're asking so many questions from adaptations of writers. So not just adaptations, but retellings. And you need to understand the difference between major terms. What is prequel? What is sequel? What is adaptation? What is a retelling? The difference between these 4 terms. It's a part of comparative and translation studies. When you do translation, these are very basic terms, right? We use it very, what to say, we use it interchangeably, but there's a major difference between adaptation and translation. There's a difference between adaptation and retelling, and prequel, sequel, and very similar kind of terms. So they have asked multiple times about this, right? Remember the question that they were asking so many questions from translation and comparative literature in 2024. These kind of questions were in great numbers. So the basic common sense is not that much common that we say. So those things are also very important, right? The mainstream novelists, as I mentioned. So Indian writers, you see, in PG examination especially, there was one question that haunts so many people. You read about Anita Desai, you read about Salman Rushdie, you even prepare the chronology of these writers. But they have asked chronology of a minor writer, maybe not minor because a very important text trained to Pakistan, Khushwant Singh, but no one reads about the chronology of Khushwant Singh, right? But that was a question of CUT PG, and then it was repeated in GATE examination. So you understand the value of PG examination and how it is associated with GATE examination, right? They asked the same question in PG exam, and then they asked repeatedly in the GATE examination as well. Now you'll only know about Train to Pakistan, maybe Delhi, by Khushwant Singh, but the chronology of Khushwant Singh, the kind of writing that he is doing, the contribution in literature, not only in literature but also in as a journalist, is important for your examination. That is one part that you read in a syllabus. these are the type of questions. I'll not talk about it in great detail because आप बीच में थ्रू आउट आप पढ़ेंगे तो आप देखेंगे कि किस तरीके से क्वेश्चंस होते हैं. मैच द फॉलोइंग्स में करेक्टर्स पूछ लेंगे. वेरी फेमस क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम व्हाट इज ए Jane Eyre writer, Charlotte Bronte, right? Or from, for example, very simple, Jane Austen. So six text, the heroines of six text, they'll ask you in matching the concept, who coined which term, and then in matching. Movements, figure of speech is a very famous thing, right? They'll give you definition of your figure of speech and they'll ask you to match them in, in match the following. So that is one very famous type of question. Assertion reason was not there in the last examination, but was there in great depth in CUT-PC. And obviously for MSQ type of questions in GATE examination, assertion reason is one such very, very important question, right? Then which concept was introduced by which person, and then such as touch, tone, negative capability, the examples given by these people is important for you. The author book name from the canon, also the author translator name, that is asked so many times now. So we have International Booker Prize given in translation text, so that we have a translator and author duo, and nowadays they're asking so many questions from there as well. The odd one out, so they'll give you 4 writers, one of which is not a part of that movement, or their characteristic is different, or he's right or she's writing about different things. So you have to find out them and you have to eliminate. And then obviously so many questions in GATE as well as in PG related to translation orientation, right? So translation as a practice. Forget about translation studies, which is again very important unit, but translation as practice. So the difference between subtitle, राइट, व्हाट इज सब टाइटल. फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको बहुत सारे आप वीडियोस देखते हैं, सब टाइटल दिखता है, डबिंग दिखता है. तो डबिंग क्या है, सब टाइटल क्या है, राइट, वॉइस ओवर क्या है, ये बहुत कॉमन चीज़ें हैं, बट ये ट्रांसलेशन स्टडीज का पार्ट है. तो ट्रांसलेशन केवल किताब का दूसरी लैंग्वेज से दूसरी लैंग्वेज में नहीं होता है, ट्रांसलेशन डिफरेंट मीडियम्स में भी होता है. इंटरमीडिएटरीज देयर इज अ टर्म फॉर दैट. सो अ नॉवेल अडेप्टेड इनटू फिल्म, सो द चेंजेस दैट आर टेकिंग प्लेस, मीडियम चेंज हो गया फ्रॉम वर्ड्स टू प्रेजेंटेशन, राइट. एक पिक्चर का टाइटल के बारे में लिख रहे थे, तो फ्रॉम पिक्चर, फ्रॉम पिक्टोरियल क्वांटिटी टू लिटरेरी एस्पेक्ट. सो बहुत से चेंजेस होते हैं मोड में भी, मीडियम में भी, और वो भी ट्रांसलेशन है. नॉवेल का फिल्म में जाना एक ट्रांसलेशन है. फिल्म का उसके ऊपर कुछ लिखना, उसका रिव्यू लिखना एक तरीके का ट्रांसलेशन है. जो टाइप्स होते हैं जो आपको समझने होते हैं, राइट. हम डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे जब इस यूनिट को. आई एम जस्ट इंट्रोड्यूसिंग यू विद दिस यूनिट. देन आई टॉक अबाउट बुक्स. बहुत सी बुक्स हैं, कौन सी बुक पढ़नी है. आप सब बहुत, आई थिंक आप ग्रेजुएशन पढ़ रहे हैं तो आप ये सारी बुक्स के बारे में जानते होंगे. कई सारी बुक्स आपको दिख रही होंगी यहाँ पे, और ये सब नहीं पढ़नी है. ऑब्वियसली आपसे एक्सपेक्टेशन भी नहीं है कि सब पढ़ लो, पर ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट यूनिट है. और लास्ट ईयर के एग्ज़ाम से, पीजी के एग्ज़ाम से, गेट के एग्ज़ाम से, नेट के एग्ज़ाम से ये समझ में आया है कि केवल क्लास से नहीं होगा, राइट, या केवल मेरे पढ़ाने से नहीं होगा. मैं आपको सब बता दूं, देयर इज सो मच दैट यू हैव टू डू एज वेल. अगर मैं आपको पढ़ाता जाऊं एंड यू विल नॉट क्वेश्चन मी, so I'll be in the state of authority, right, and maybe my understanding of one thing will be different from yours, and when you'll read about it as well, then you'll challenge me, you'll ask questions, and then I have to look at the different perspective as well. That is the true learning, right? And you have a lot of time now because we are here is 2nd 3rd June, right, and your exam will happen in, the GATE exam will happen in February, the CUT exam will happen somewhere in March and April. So you need to make the best of it, and you'll have to read these texts. I'll tell you everything related to it in great detail. Our course is famous for that. You can ask previous year students as well. You don't need to read these books if you're reading our classes, but the 10% questions that will come, for to understand those questions, and that will make the difference, you'll have to read the book. It's a reality. Now, what big book to read, right? Some people, they are very good in English, they can read, what to say, David Deschamps, but for some who still needs to develop their critical understanding, it is a very difficult text, right? If you are not critically aware, you'll not be able to understand 60% of David Deschamps. Maybe you'll understand 80% of J. Long if you understand English, right? Or more than that, because it's very factual, it will give you the chronology and everything. But to understand David Deschamps, you need a critical mindset. And if you want to really enjoy the learning, right, if you want to enjoy the history of British literature, then you can read Routledge, right? So if your base is strong, then you can directly go to Routledge, right? If you're from good university, you know the ages, you know the characteristic. But if you're not aware about those things, you'll have to read J Long, and then you'll have to come to Rootless to enjoy it, right? This is one such book, Oxford Companion, as well as Edward Elbert. Edward Elbert is one such book which you can enjoy as well as get so much information from it as well. And Oxford Companion is also interesting because it gives you a lot of factual information. So it's up to you. You have to decide, and it is very subjective as well at what level you are. We can talk about it in later in our classes as well. Obviously, that which book is going to be important for you. But there are changes that obviously you can incorporate, and it comes with every unit, not just with British literature, but every unit. When you'll read British literature, the Indian literature, there are 3 books, right? And there is no mention of Indian aesthetics as well. You'll have to read a different book for Indian aesthetics, right? You'll have to read a different book for contemporary Indian writers. But in order to understand Indian literature in English, how English was introduced, there are different texts for that as well. But the writers, the way they are writing, their characteristics, their books, their information, that you'll find a great detail in Iyengar. But Malhotra recently is very famous because the language, like the way you have Rootless there in British literature, similarly you have Malhotra here in Indian literature. I'll give you advice. If you're reading it on your own as well, that also works. Understand that you'll have to read the preface of all these 3 texts. And trust me, if you'll read the preface, 30% or 40% of the way of writing, right, in Indian English literature, you'll easily understand, and it will be easy for you to understand the writers of Indian English writing literature, right? So for that you need to understand the preface. So I always suggest to all my students that you'll have to read the introduction part of all these 3 texts, and then you can choose whatever book you want to read. Obviously this is a very big book, Iyengar 800 and 900 pages, so usually people prefer M.K. Naik or Malhotra, right? So it's an important unit as well. But again, for Indian aesthetics, there is no reference in any of these books. For contemporary Indian writers, there is no reference. There is some influence in Malhotra. You'll find about popular literature writers, but nowhere in these 2 books. Then this is a book which you must read in your BA first year or second year. And if you're a third year student and you have not read it, it's a crime, I'm telling you. So you'll have to give so much emphasis to this book. For your first day, the day you decide to appear in CUT PG examination, the day you decide to appear in GATE examination, NET examination, or any exam related to English, you'll have to read this book. There is no escape from that. And if your basic is strong, then you'll understand this book in detail. We'll have to, this gives you kind of structure. So you read about certain thing, but you'll get the structure in it here, right? So you see realism. So there are writers in 14th century, 16th century, 18th century writing realistic novel. But if you'll read the realism entry from Glossary of Literary Terms, then you'll understand the structure, how 14th century writers were writing, how 17th century writers were writing, the group and every other thing. So it gives you that kind of a structure. And very important book. If you have not started reading it, it's a crime. You must start it, read 5 or 6 entries every day so that you can complete it in 1 or 2 months. Okay, very important, very important, I must tell you. And equally, if you'll read this book simply, you'll get 30-40 questions directly in your examination. 40% I'm saying, right? That much of importance to this particular book. Then word literature, as I mentioned, there is one very important, very beautifully emphasized book by a famous person, Prem Shankar Pandey, Professor Prem Shankar Pandey, and he has given you everything that you need to read. This book is comes with Indian literature, American literature, British literature, everything in an anthology. That means for every text, the factual information is given. So it's a 730 page book which actually introduce you with everything that you have to read. But you'll have to build on it as well, right? Not everything that is written there is important, and not everything that is written here is complete. So you'll have to build on that as well. But it's a very interesting book in that context. And there's literary criticism. There are so many books. I'll tell you honestly, so many people suggest Habib, but it's impossible for you to read Habib if you are a BA last year student. You'll not understand anything. I'm telling you. You'll read 1 page of Habib and you'll not have 1 single line to tell me that what you have understood, if your background is obviously not strong. So Habib in that context is difficult. But there is a book by Royan Dwivedi. I have not given you the page of that particular book. You can search it on Amazon and other things. Royan Dwivedi's book, very underrated, but everything that is a part of literary criticism, very short book as well, but everything that is a part of his syllabus is covered by Ryan Dwivedi in History of Literary Criticism. So must read book, but yes, for higher level, for net examination, you'll have to read Habib in future, right? So there are many other books as well. This Claude Rawson's edition of Literary Criticism also become very famous these days. The Marshall Brown text as well, right, divided into two parts, but obviously not for PG level. For GATE level you can read. For PG level, this book is a must read book. He'll, very important, very short, and tells you everything. This is theory. Again, like British literature, if your base is weak, you'll have to read Beginning Theory, Peter Berry. Must read text. Contemporary literature theory by P.K. Nair, who's a professor in Hyderabad University. If you get admission in Central University of Hyderabad, you'll get to read by the writer of P.K. Nair, who is the first writer from India, from UNESCO chair, vulnerability studies, precarity studies, and so much, culture studies, theory, so many books, and you'll get this privilege to read by him if you are getting admission into Hyderabad University. I'm very happy to share that so many of my students from this year as well getting admission in IFLU and SAU. So I'm very excited for that as well. Very interesting book, important book for British literature, for literary theory. This is also a very interesting book. It is by Kalyani Velath ma'am. You may know her if you're using YouTube, and if you're aware about the contemporary teachers from YouTube. Kalyani Velath is a big name. She teaches for net and media exams, and this is a book edited by her. You find very new way of reading literary theory, and there's another book related to culture studies which I have to read for GATE examination, the Pocket Dictionary of Culture Studies. Very, very beautiful book by Kalyani Velath, right? Then there are many other sources, as you can see, and you'll have to make the best use of it. Why? Because there are more than 10,000, 20,000 texts. You can't read everything. You can't read every text, but you don't know which text is important for your examination. So that comes the role of Spark Notes and Britannica. It not gives you a detailed summary. It also gives you so many MCQs to solve. It also gives you a character development, their role in the text. And it also gives you a figure of speech used in or the tropes used in those texts, right, in the novels and in the drama. So in that context, Spark Notes and Britannica is very important source, right? Even Wikipedia, if you'll see those questions from minor writers or from major writers, minor text, they're also from directly from Wikipedia pages of those writers and theorists. So Wikipedia, we may see that's free, so it's very easy, but how to use it also becomes very, very important for us. Poetry Foundation, right? The poetry where the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was first published, later changed into Poetry Foundation, and now you have to read, if you have to read poems, you'll have to go through this particular Poetry Foundation as well. So many poems, it's all free, you can read as many as possible, and you have to, obviously, you'll get one or two questions from famous poems and lines directly quoted from there. Right, YouTube, so many teachers are teaching, so many YouTube videos available, and you have to make best use of those videos as well, right? You see, we are also running a batch for GATE exam and PG foundational, and there is a net batch as well. The things are common. We talk about these things every year, now and then. You can check our results. It's also available everywhere on our page. We are very proud to say, I am very proud to mention that the best universities have our students every year, beginning from 2021. JNU, DU, BHU is full of our students. JNU, we have so many students coming, a couple of students getting admission last day as well. DU, major parts. So we have very very good at moment that we have developed. We try our best to to adapt to the new changes that are taking place. So few things are common. We will get everyday class, there is recording available, we do Sunday test, notes in those forms. This is something that every teacher does, so it's nothing new. But yes, there are weekly summary session that we have added, बिकॉज गेट एग्जाम के लिए वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. पीजी में भी लास्ट ईयर अगर आप किसी स्टूडेंट से जुड़े हुए हैं जो हमारे साथ था तो आपको समझ में आएगा कि हमने कितनी सारी नॉवेल्स, ड्रामा, पोएम्स को पढ़ा है अपने अलग से क्लासेस के थ्रू, अपने डिफरेंट व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप के थ्रू, और इतना सारा नॉलेज इकट्ठा किया है विच इज़ नॉट गोइंग टू हेल्प अस in the PG examination. Obviously, it is going to help us, but in future, when you'll appear in GATE or in NET examination, you'll find how this course is going to help you there as well. So this is all about this course. I'm not going to talk about it in detail. You'll get to know about it when you'll enter into the course. That's it. I hope I made justice to the syllabus part. I'll talk about them one by one in detail in upcoming days. So I'll explain you the units and what is supposed to be, read in these units in our next few classes. So I'll meet here either in the live every day, or what to say, through videos. They'll get to know about every unit in detail, separately. So I'll talk about what is needed. I'm not going to teach you, British literature here on YouTube, but I'll explain you the way you have to read these things, the way you need to approach to these units. What are the things that are important from these units? If you're reading it on your own as well, you can explore those things as well. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope this is going to help you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll meet tomorrow at the same time to continue discussing one unit from this particular syllabus, right? I hope you understand the common things between these two exams, and surely we are going to get so much success, not only for PG but also for GATE examination, which will help you out in your future as well. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.